I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who'd have to choose between her dignity and her family. But at 62 years old, sitting in my kitchen in suburban Ohio, staring at a text message that would change everything, I realize sometimes life forces that choice on you whether you're ready or not. My name is Patricia Williams, and for the past 5 years since my husband Robert passed away, I've been living what most people would call a quiet, comfortable retirement. After 35 years as a senior accountant at Morrison & Associates, I'd managed to save what I thought was a respectable nest egg, $400,000 between Robert's life insurance, our joint savings, and my 401k. Not wealthy by any means, but enough to live comfortably and help my family when needed. Every morning, I wake up at 6 a.m. sharp. Old habits from decades of corporate life die hard. I make my coffee in the same blue ceramic mug Robert gave me for our 20th anniversary, sit at our kitchen table that's probably older than most people's cars, and read the Columbus Dispatch cover to cover. It's a routine that gives my days structure, something I desperately needed after Robert's sudden heart attack left me rattling around in our 3-bedroom ranch house like a marble in an empty jar. The house sits on Maple Street in a neighborhood that was considered upscale when we bought it in 1987. Now it's just comfortable. Middle-class families with kids who ride bikes in the driveways, elderly couples like Robert and I used to be, and the occasional young professional who can't quite afford the newer developments but wants the charm of established trees and sidewalks. I spend most mornings tending to the rose garden Robert planted along our fence line. Those roses have become my therapy, my connection to him, my reason to get up and go outside even when the Ohio weather makes me want to hibernate. But the real highlight of my week, the thing I looked forward to more than anything else, was my Saturday morning phone call with my son Michael. Every week at 9 a.m., like clockwork, I'd dial his number and we'd catch up on life. He'd tell me about his job in IT at a mid-sized company downtown, about his wife Jessica's latest marketing projects, and most importantly, about my 2 precious grandchildren, Emma, who's 6 and sharp as a tack, and Noah, who just turned 4 and has his grandfather's mischievous smile. Michael is my only child, and I'll admit it. I've probably spoiled him his entire life. When your husband dies and leaves you with one connection to the future, one person who carries your family name and your DNA forward, it's hard not to pour all your love and hopes into that relationship. Robert used to joke that I'd give Michael the shirt off my back if he asked for it. He wasn't wrong. Michael married Jessica Martinez 3 years ago, and I thought I'd won the daughter-in-law lottery. She was beautiful, smart, ambitious. Everything I'd hoped my son would find in a partner. At 31, she had this confidence about her that I'd never possessed at that age, a way of walking into a room and commanding attention. She worked for a digital marketing agency, always had the latest iPhone, drove a car that looked like it belonged in a magazine, and seemed to have everything figured out. In the beginning, our relationship felt natural, easy. She'd laugh at my stories about Michael's childhood mishaps, ask for my recipes, and even suggested we start a tradition of monthly family dinners. Every first Sunday of the month, I'd drive the 23 minutes to their apartment, arms loaded with homemade casseroles and desserts, and we'd sit around their small dining table like a real family. Emma would show me her latest artwork from school. Noah would climb into my lap for stories, and for a few hours, the house felt less empty. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. Or maybe I saw them and chose to ignore them because I wanted so desperately to believe everything was perfect. The first red flag should have been obvious. During those monthly dinners, Jessica rarely invited me inside immediately. I'd stand on their doorstep for what felt like an eternity while she finished up in the kitchen or got the kids ready. When she finally opened the door, it was always with this practiced smile that I now realize never quite reached her eyes. She'd take my dishes with quick thanks and usher me to the living room, keeping me in designated areas like I was a guest rather than family. The conversations, too, began to feel stilted. Where Jessica used to ask about my week, my garden, my book club, she started giving short responses to my questions and checking her phone constantly. When I'd share a story about Robert or talk about my parents' generation, I'd catch her rolling her eyes or exchanging glances with Michael. Little things, but they accumulated like dust in corners. Barely noticeable until suddenly you realize everything needs cleaning. Michael's phone calls started changing too. Our Saturday morning conversations went from 45 minutes of genuine catching up to 15-minute check-ins where he sounded distracted, hurried. He'd interrupt me mid-sentence with, "Sorry, Mom, Jessica needs me for something," or "The kids are acting up, can I call you back?" But he rarely did call back. Then there were the holidays. Thanksgiving 2022 was the first time they made other plans. Jessica's family, Michael explained apologetically, had this tradition of going to her aunt's house in Cleveland. It was just 1 year, he said. Christmas was spent at their place, but it felt different, formal, like I was being tolerated rather than welcomed. Jessica orchestrated everything with military precision. What time I should arrive, when we'd eat, when gift opening would happen, and there was an unspoken but clear expectation that I'd leave shortly after dinner rather than linger the way families do. The grandchildren started feeling more distant too. Emma, who used to run to me for hugs, began staying close to Jessica's side during visits. Noah, always my little buddy, seemed less interested in our special games. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up, develop their own personalities, get busy with school and friends. But deep down, I knew something was shifting. The most painful change was in Michael himself. My son, who used to call me for advice about everything from which insurance plan to choose to whether he should plant tomatoes or peppers in his small garden, stopped asking for my input on anything significant. When they moved to a larger apartment, I found out after the fact. When Jessica got a promotion, I heard about it through a casual mention 2 weeks later. I felt like I was becoming a footnote in my own son's life. But I convinced myself this was normal. This was what happened when children got married and started their own families. They needed space to build their own traditions, their own lives. I was being an overprotective mother, reading too much into innocent changes. Jessica wasn't trying to push me out. She was just establishing her role as the woman of their house. I needed to step back, give them room to breathe, be grateful for whatever relationship they were willing to give me. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday night in March at 11:15 p.m. I was already in my nightgown, settling into bed with the latest Louise Penny mystery, when my cell phone rang. Late calls always sent my heart racing. When you're in your 60s and living alone, a phone ringing after 10 p.m. usually means bad news. "Mom?" Michael's voice sounded strange, strained. "Honey, what's wrong? Is everyone okay?" "Everyone's fine, Mom. I'm sorry to call so late. We need to talk to you about something important, and I couldn't wait until morning." I sat up straighter, turning on the bedside lamp. "What is it?" "Jessica and I found a house, Mom. Our dream house. It's in Westerville, in this amazing neighborhood with great schools. Emma and Noah would have their own rooms. There's a huge backyard, everything we've ever wanted." Relief flooded through me. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you both." "The thing is," he paused, and I could hear Jessica's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. "The thing is, we need to move fast, like really fast. The sellers have another offer, and they're making a decision tomorrow afternoon. We need to put down $340,000 to secure it." My stomach dropped. $340,000? Michael, that's... "I know it's a lot, Mom. I know, but this is it. This is our chance to give the kids the life they deserve. A real yard, good schools, a safe neighborhood. Jessica's been looking for 2 years, and nothing this perfect has come up." I was quiet for a moment, processing. $340,000. It was almost my entire life savings. But this was my son, my grandchildren's future, their security and happiness. "Honey, you know I'd do anything for you and the kids, but that's almost everything I have saved." "I know, Mom. I know what I'm asking, but we wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. Jessica's been crying all evening thinking we're going to lose this house. The kids are so excited. We already told them about the tire swing in the backyard and the creek that runs behind the property. More background conversation with Jessica, more urgent whispers. Mom, I hate asking you this, but you always said family comes first, right? You always said you wanted the kids to have opportunities you and Dad never had. This is it. This is their chance. My heart broke a little at the emotion in his voice. This was my son, my baby, asking for help to build a better life for his family. How could I say no? Of course, sweetheart. Of course I'll help. Family does come first. The relief in his voice was palpable. Mom, I love you so much. Jessica and the kids are going to be over the moon. You're giving us our dream, you know that? We talked for another 10 minutes about logistics, wire transfers, timing, paperwork. Michael assured me that while I'd be fronting the money, they'd pay me back over time, though we both knew that was probably more hope than realistic plan. I hung up feeling simultaneously terrified about spending most of my life savings and deeply satisfied that I could provide this kind of security for my family. The next morning, I was at First National Bank when they opened at 9 a.m. By noon, $340,000 had been wired to an account Michael provided. By evening, he called to tell me the house was theirs. For 3 weeks, I walked around with this warm glow of satisfaction. I'd done something meaningful, something that would impact my grandchildren's lives for years to come. I imagined Sunday dinners in their new dining room, holidays where I'd stay in their guest room, watching Emma and Noah grow up in a house their grandmother had helped provide. I even went shopping for the cruise. The cruise had been planned for 2 months, a 7-day Caribbean vacation to celebrate Jessica's 30th birthday and their 3rd wedding anniversary. It was going to be a family affair. Michael, Jessica, the kids, and me. I'd booked my own cabin, of course, not wanting to impose on their romantic getaway, but excited about the chance to spend uninterrupted time with Emma and Noah. Pool games, shuffleboard tournaments, maybe teaching Emma to play bridge like my mother had taught me. I'd bought 3 new outfits, including a sundress that made me feel younger than I had in years. I'd gotten my hair done at Carmen's salon, splurged on a manicure, and even bought a new swimsuit, the first one I'd purchased since Robert died. The cruise represented everything I thought our family relationship was becoming: inclusive, fun, multi-generational. The text message arrived on a Thursday afternoon while I was deadheading roses in my front garden. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I pulled it out with dirt-stained fingers, expecting some sweet message from one of the kids or maybe Michael sending a photo of their packing progress. Instead, I read words that felt like a physical blow. You won't be joining us on the cruise. My wife prefers to keep it just family. I read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. Then I read it again and again. My wife prefers to keep it just family. I wasn't family. According to the daughter-in-law I'd just given $340,000 to, I wasn't family. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I sat down hard on my front steps, my gardening gloves still on. Dirt smudged across my new jeans, and stared at those words until they blurred. 3 weeks. 3 weeks after I'd wired them the down payment for their dream house, after I'd emptied my savings account to secure their children's future, I was being uninvited from a family vacation because Jessica preferred to keep it just family. The cruelty of the timing hit me like a sledgehammer. They'd waited until after the money was transferred, after the house was secured, after I was financially committed and emotionally invested. Then, with 17 words sent via text message, not even a phone call, they'd removed me from their lives. I called Michael immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I called again an hour later. Voicemail. I tried Jessica's number, something I'd never done before. Voicemail. By evening, I'd left 4 messages, each one more desperate than the last. Michael, honey, please call me back. I think there's been some misunderstanding. Sweetheart, can we talk about the cruise? I'm confused about the text message. Michael, please. Just 5 minutes. Help me understand what's happening. Nothing. That night, I sat in my kitchen until 3 a.m. staring at my phone, waiting for some explanation, some clarification, some acknowledgement that this was all a terrible mistake. The cruise tickets lay spread across my kitchen table like evidence of my own stupidity. My boarding pass, my excursion bookings, my cabin assignment, all worthless now. But worse than the wasted money, worse than the humiliation, was the dawning realization that I'd been played, used, manipulated in the most calculating way possible. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before in my 62 years of life. I started investigating my own family. I began with the paperwork from the house purchase, documents I'd signed without reading carefully because I trusted my son implicitly. As I spread everything across my dining room table, details I'd missed became glaringly obvious. The primary name on the deed wasn't Michael Williams. It was Jessica Martinez Williams. The account that had received my wire transfer was a joint account, but Jessica's name was listed first. The mortgage application, which I finally requested a copy of, listed Jessica as the primary applicant with Michael as a co-signer. I'd bought my daughter-in-law a house. My son had been little more than a messenger. That afternoon, I called my attorney, Harold Brennan, who'd handled Robert's estate. Harold was in his 70s, had known our family for 20 years, and had the kind of old-school directness that I desperately needed. "Patricia," he said after reviewing the documents I'd brought to his office, "I'm going to give it to you straight. Legally speaking, you have very little recourse here. You made a gift. There was no formal loan agreement, no promissory note, no legal obligation for repayment. Unless you can prove fraud, and that's nearly impossible in family situations like this, that money is gone." "But Harold, they used me. They waited until after I paid for the house to uninvite me from the family vacation. That has to count for something." Harold leaned back in his leather chair, his expression sympathetic but realistic. "Morally? Absolutely. They treated you abominably, legally. They thanked you for your generosity and then chose to take a vacation without you. Hurtful, yes. Illegal, no." I left his office feeling more alone than I had since Robert's funeral. The people I loved most in the world had used me, discarded me, and there was nothing I could do about it legally. But as I drove home through the streets of my quiet neighborhood, something else began to grow alongside the hurt and anger. Something cold and determined. If the law couldn't help me, maybe I'd have to help myself. That evening, I called my neighbor Margaret Chen, who'd lived across the street for 15 years. Margaret was a retired real estate agent who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. "Patricia, honey," she said, when I explained what had happened, "I hate to say this, but some of us saw this coming." "What do you mean?" "Well, Jessica's been over here a few times when you were out, always asking questions about you, how long you'd lived here, whether you owned the house outright, what Robert had done for work. At first I thought she was just being a good daughter-in-law, trying to understand your life better, but the questions were specific, financial." My blood went cold. "What kind of specific?" "Like whether you had a retirement fund, whether you'd gotten life insurance money when Robert passed, whether you'd ever talked about what you planned to do with your assets. I thought it was odd, but I figured maybe Michael had asked her to check on your financial stability. You know, make sure you were okay living alone." And the manipulation went deeper than I'd imagined. Jessica hadn't just taken advantage of an opportunity. She'd been researching me, planning this for months, maybe years. "Margaret, did she ever say anything about me not being around anymore?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Patricia, are you sure you want to know this?" "I need to know." "Last month, when she was asking about your house value, she mentioned something about how nice it would be when you eventually moved somewhere smaller, like assisted living. She said it would be better for everyone if you had less to worry about and they could focus on building their own family traditions." The words hit me like ice water. Jessica had been planning my exit from their lives while simultaneously planning to take my money. I wasn't just being excluded from one cruise, I was being systematically removed from my grandchildren's lives, from my son's future, from my own family. But Jessica had made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I was a sweet, naive old lady who would accept being discarded quietly. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Margaret's revelation about Jessica's calculated planning was the spark that ignited something I didn't know I still had in me. The fierce determination that had gotten me through 35 years in corporate accounting, through Robert's illness and death, through every challenge life had thrown at me. But this time, I wasn't going to be the victim. The next morning, I did something I'd never imagined I'd need to do. I hired a private investigator. Thomas Bradley came recommended by Harold Brennan as someone who specialized in family financial disputes. He was a former police detective, probably in his 50s, with the kind of steady, professional demeanor that inspired confidence. When I explained my situation, he didn't seem surprised or judgmental. Apparently, financial manipulation within families was more common than I'd realized. "Mrs. Williams," he said during our initial meeting at his small downtown office, "I need you to understand that what we find might be difficult to hear. Sometimes when people feel comfortable enough to execute this kind of long-term manipulation, it's because they've done it before." "I need to know the truth, Mr. Bradley, all of it." What Thomas discovered over the next 2 weeks changed everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law and opened my eyes to just how thoroughly I'd been played. Jessica Martinez Williams had $85,000 in credit card debt spread across 7 different cards. Not unusual debt for someone her age, Thomas explained, but the spending patterns were revealing. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, a luxury vacation to Belize just 6 months earlier. All charged while she and Michael were supposedly saving for their dream house. But that was just the beginning. Thomas found records showing that Jessica had used the money I'd wired for the house to pay off $60,000 of her personal debt before putting anything toward the actual down payment. The house had cost $340,000, but she'd only put down $280,000. The rest, my money, had gone directly to credit card companies. "She essentially used you as a debt consolidation loan," Thomas explained when he delivered his report. "Your son may not even know. The way she structured the accounts and paperwork, it would be very easy to hide this from him." The financial fraud was devastating enough, but what Thomas discovered about Jessica's family history was what truly opened my eyes to her character. Jessica's own parents, Carlos and Maria Martinez, had cut contact with her 2 years earlier after she'd borrowed $15,000 for what she claimed was a medical emergency. It turned out she'd used the money for cosmetic procedures and a shopping spree. When they'd confronted her, she'd responded by refusing to let them see their granddaughter, Emma, unless they apologized for not trusting her. Carlos Martinez had been surprisingly willing to talk to Thomas when contacted. "That girl," he'd said, "she's got a gift for making people feel guilty for her problems. She made us think we were bad parents for questioning her, bad grandparents for wanting accountability. We haven't seen Emma in over a year because Jessica uses her like a weapon." The pattern was becoming clear. Jessica identified people who loved deeply and unconditionally, parents, grandparents, in-laws, and systematically exploited that love for financial gain. When they became inconvenient or started asking questions, she cut them off and used the children as leverage to prevent them from exposing her. I was just her latest mark. But Thomas's most damning discovery came from Jessica's social media accounts, which she apparently didn't realize were visible to people with investigative skills. 3 weeks before Michael's late-night phone call about the house, Jessica had posted in a private Facebook group called Dealing with Toxic In-Laws. The post read, "Finally figured out how to get rid of my manipulative MIL and get her money at the same time. Step 1, emergency house situation she can't resist helping with. Step 2, take the money. Step 3, create distance by excluding her from family events. Step 4, wait for her to get the hint and disappear on her own. Wish me luck, ladies." The responses were a mix of encouragement and tactical advice from other women who apparently viewed their in-laws as obstacles rather than family. One commenter had written, "Genius. Let us know how it works out. I need to try something similar with my husband's mother." Reading that post felt like being stabbed in the chest with a rusty knife. Every word of Michael's desperate phone call had been scripted. Every emotion he'd expressed had been coached by his wife. The urgency, the tears Jessica had supposedly shed, the story about telling the children about the tire swing. All of it had been a carefully constructed lie designed to manipulate my grandmother's heart and open my grandmother's wallet. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Thomas's office building for 20 minutes, crying harder than I had since Robert's funeral. Not just for the money, though $340,000 was devastating. Not just for the betrayal, though discovering that my son had been turned into a weapon against me was heartbreaking. I cried for my grandchildren, who were being raised by a woman who saw family relationships as transactions, who taught them that love was conditional and exploitable. But when the tears stopped, something else took their place. Something cold and determined and absolutely done with being anyone's victim. I had always been the nice lady, the accommodating mother, the woman who smoothed over conflicts and made everyone comfortable. I'd spent my entire life putting other people's needs before my own, assuming that kindness and generosity would be reciprocated, that family meant something sacred and protective. Jessica had made the mistake of assuming I'd continue being that woman even after she'd shown me exactly who she was. She was wrong. That evening, I called Harold Brennan again. This time, I wasn't asking for sympathy or hoping for an impossible legal solution. I was planning a war. "Harold, I need you to help me understand something. If I can prove that Jessica used the money I gave them for purposes other than the house purchase, does that change anything legally?" "Potentially. If you can prove fraud, that she misrepresented how the money would be used with the intention of deceiving you, then yes, you might have grounds for legal action. But Patricia, proving intent to defraud in family situations is extremely difficult. What if I could prove she'd planned the deception in advance? What if I had evidence that this was premeditated?" Harold's tone sharpened with interest. "What kind of evidence are we talking about?" I told him about Thomas's investigation, about Jessica's debt, about her Facebook post, about the pattern with her own parents. Harold was quiet for a long moment. "Patricia, if you can document all of this properly, you might have grounds to force a sale of the house to recover your money. It wouldn't be easy, and it would certainly destroy your relationship with your son, but legally..." "Harold, my relationship with my son is already destroyed. Jessica made sure of that when she convinced him to exclude me from their family. The question now is whether I'm going to let them keep my money while they do it. The plan we developed wasn't about revenge, though I won't lie and say revenge wasn't a factor. It was about consequences. Jessica had calculated that I would be too hurt, too embarrassed, too attached to my relationship with Michael to fight back. She'd assumed that I'd quietly accept being discarded and write off the money as the price of maintaining some minimal contact with my grandchildren. She'd miscalculated badly. The legal strategy was straightforward, but required perfect timing. Since I could prove that Jessica had misrepresented how my money would be used, and since I had documentation showing premeditated fraud, Harold could file papers to force the sale of the house to recover my funds. However, the process would take time, and Jessica would have opportunities to hide assets or create additional complications, unless we acted while they were out of the country and unable to respond immediately. While Michael and Jessica were on their adults-only cruise, the cruise I'd been uninvited from after paying for their house, I would serve them with legal papers and put their dream home on the market. The irony was perfect. They'd used my exclusion from their family vacation as the final insult, the ultimate proof that I was dispensable. Instead, their vacation would become the window of opportunity I needed to take back what was mine. I spent the week before their departure making preparations. Harold filed all the necessary paperwork but held off on serving it until I gave him the signal. I contacted Sarah Mitchell, a real estate agent Margaret Chen had recommended, and explained the situation. Sarah was fascinated by the legal complexity and agreed to have everything ready to list the house the moment I had legal authorization. Most importantly, I prepared myself emotionally for what was coming. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about teaching two people who'd treated my love like a commodity that actions have consequences. This was about showing Jessica that grandmothers aren't always easy targets. This was about forcing Michael to choose between his manipulative wife and the mother who'd sacrificed everything for his happiness. I knew there was a good chance I'd lose him entirely. Jessica was skilled at emotional manipulation, and she'd undoubtedly paint me as the villain in this story. Michael might never forgive me for destroying his marriage and his house. I might never see Emma and Noah again. But I'd already lost them, hadn't I? Jessica's Facebook post made it clear that cutting me out of their lives wasn't a reaction to my behavior. It was always the plan. At least this way, I'd retain my dignity and my financial security. The morning Michael and Jessica left for Miami to board their cruise ship, I was at the Franklin County Courthouse when it opened at 8 a.m. Harold was waiting with all the paperwork perfectly organized, and by 9:30 we had a court order authorizing the forced sale of the house to recover my fraudulently obtained funds. By 10 a.m., a process server was at the house, posting legal notices on the front door and leaving copies with the neighbor who'd agreed to accept service on behalf of the absent homeowners. By 11 a.m., Sarah Mitchell was at the property with a locksmith, a photographer, and a for sale sign. The legal papers gave me the right to secure the property pending resolution of the fraud case. Within an hour, the locks were changed, the house was photographed for listing purposes, and a bright red for sale sign was prominently displayed on the front lawn. I stayed to watch the process, sitting in my car across the street like a general surveying a battlefield. Neighbors came out to investigate the commotion. Margaret Chen walked over to chat with Sarah, and I could see her explaining the situation to the growing crowd of curious onlookers. Part of me felt sick watching it happen. This was my son's house, my grandchildren's home. Emma's bedroom was probably decorated with princesses and rainbows. Noah's room might have model airplanes hanging from the ceiling. These were spaces where they felt safe and loved, and I was destroying that security. But then I remembered Jessica's Facebook post. Finally figured out how to get rid of my manipulative MIL and get her money at the same time. I remembered the calculated cruelty of uninviting me from their vacation via text message. I remembered Margaret's revelation about Jessica planning my exit from their lives while simultaneously planning to take my savings. My grandchildren's security had been built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. Better to tear it down now and force them to build something honest than to let them grow up thinking this kind of behavior was normal or acceptable. By noon, the house was listed for sale at $340,000, exactly what I'd paid for it. Sarah was confident we'd have offers within days, given the desirable neighborhood and competitive pricing. By 1 p.m., I was home in my own kitchen, making myself a sandwich and waiting for my phone to ring. It took 3 days. I was in my garden, pulling weeds from around Robert's roses, when my cell phone started buzzing with an incoming call. Michael's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment my courage almost failed me. This was still my baby, my only child, the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when thunderstorms scared him. But then I remembered that same little boy had grown up to help his wife manipulate and discard the mother who'd given him everything. "Hello, Michael. Mom, what the hell have you done?" His voice was raw with panic and fury. "We just got back to the ship and there are 17 missed calls from our neighbor saying our house is for sale, and we've been served with legal papers." I imagine that was quite a shock, I said calmly, continuing to pull weeds while we talked. "A shock? Mom, you've lost your mind. You can't just sell our house." "Actually, I can. It's not your house, sweetheart. It's my house. I paid for it, and according to the paperwork your wife so carefully prepared, I'm the legal owner until my investment is repaid. What are you talking about? We never agreed to any repayment terms. Exactly. Your wife took my $340,000 under false pretenses, used $60,000 of it to pay her personal credit card debt, and then excluded me from your family because she prefers to keep it just family. I'm simply recovering my property. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Michael spoke again, his voice was smaller, confused. Mom, what do you mean she used it for credit card debt? I mean your wife had $85,000 in debt that she paid off with my money before putting anything toward your house. I mean, she posted in a Facebook group about her plan to get rid of me and get my money at the same time. I mean, you've been married to a woman who sees our family as her personal bank account. Another long silence. I could hear Jessica's voice in the background, sharp and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. That's not... Mom, you don't understand. Jessica was just trying to protect our marriage. She thought you were too involved in our lives, too controlling. Michael, 3 weeks ago you called me crying about losing your dream house and begged me to save your family's future. Last week, your wife uninvited me from our vacation because I'm not really family. Today, I'm too controlling. Do you see how none of that makes sense? You're ruining our lives. No, sweetheart. I'm stopping you from ruining mine. Jessica must have grabbed the phone because suddenly her voice was screaming through the speaker. You crazy old bitch, you can't do this. We have children. You're making your own grandchildren homeless. Jessica, I said, my voice steady and cold, you made a mistake when you assumed I'd be too polite to fight back. You made a bigger mistake when you used my son to manipulate me. But your biggest mistake was thinking you could steal from me and then throw me away like garbage. We'll sue you. We'll fight this. You'll never see Emma and Noah again. Sweetie, your own parents haven't seen Emma in over a year because you use children as weapons when people don't give you what you want. I'm already not seeing my grandchildren. The difference is, now I'm not paying for the privilege of being excluded. I hung up before she could respond. The phone rang again immediately. I declined the call and turned off my phone. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal activity and neighborhood drama. Sarah Mitchell fielded multiple offers on the house within 48 hours of listing it. We accepted a cash offer for the full asking price from a young family who could close within 2 weeks. Harold handled the legal complications as Michael and Jessica's attorney tried to block the sale. But the documentation was ironclad. Jessica's own paperwork proved that she'd structured the purchase in a way that made me the primary owner, and Thomas Bradley's investigation provided clear evidence of fraud. The house sold on a Tuesday morning, while Michael and Jessica were still on their cruise, still frantically trying to coordinate legal responses from ship internet that kept cutting out. By the time they returned to Miami, the sale was finalized and my money was back in my account. Well, most of it. Legal fees, real estate commissions, and investigation costs meant I recovered about $310,000 of my original $340,000. An expensive lesson, but not a devastating loss. The real cost was my relationship with Michael. He called me the day after they returned to Columbus, after they'd discovered their house was no longer theirs, and their belongings were in a storage facility pending their decision about where to move next. Mom, I can't believe you actually did this. You've destroyed our marriage, made our children homeless, and humiliated us in front of the entire neighborhood. Michael, your marriage was already destroyed by Jessica's lies and manipulation. Your children are not homeless. You're staying with Jessica's sister while you figure out your next steps. And I didn't humiliate you in front of the neighborhood. Jessica's behavior and choices did that. She's my wife, Mom. I chose her. I love her. And I'm your mother, sweetheart. I chose you before you even drew your first breath, and I've loved you unconditionally for 34 years. But unconditional love doesn't mean accepting abuse, and it doesn't mean funding my own exclusion from your life. You want me to choose between you and Jessica. No, honey, I want you to choose between right and wrong. I want you to acknowledge that what Jessica did to me was calculated, cruel, and unforgivable. I want you to understand that a woman who would manipulate your mother's love to steal her life savings is not someone who will treat you any better when it serves her purposes. But Michael had already made his choice. Jessica had spent their entire marriage training him to see her as the victim of everyone else's unreasonable expectations. She'd convinced him that anyone who questioned her behavior or held her accountable for her actions was toxic, controlling, manipulative, including his own mother. "I can't have someone in my life who would do what you did to us," he said finally. "Jessica's right. You are controlling and manipulative. You used money to try to control our lives, and when we didn't do what you wanted, you retaliated. Michael, I gave you that money freely with no strings attached because I loved you and wanted to help your family. The only thing I expected in return was to remain part of that family. When Jessica decided I wasn't worth including even after I'd given you everything I had, I decided I wasn't willing to pay for the privilege of being discarded. We're done, Mom. Don't call us. Don't come by. Don't try to contact the kids. You made your choice." The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call, staring at my coffee mug and trying to process what had just happened. In the space of 2 weeks, I'd gone from being a devoted grandmother and mother to being completely cut off from my only family. The smart money said I should feel devastated, broken, consumed with regret for choosing money over relationships. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: relief. For the first time since Robert died, I wasn't walking on eggshells around people who were supposed to love me. I wasn't second-guessing every word I said or analyzing every interaction for signs that I was being too much, too involved, too present in my own son's life. I wasn't funding my own emotional abuse or enabling someone who saw my love as a weakness to be exploited. I was free. 6 months later, I was living in a beautiful retirement community in St. Petersburg, Florida, 10 minutes away from my sister Carol and her husband Frank. The Florida weather was perfect for my old bones, and the community was full of active, interesting people who'd lived full lives and had stories to tell. I joined a book club, started taking watercolor painting classes, and discovered that I had a talent for bridge that had been hiding under decades of being too busy taking care of everyone else. I'd even been on a few dates with a lovely widower named George Harrison, no relation to the Beatle, he always joked, who made me laugh and treated me like I was interesting rather than just useful. The house in Ohio had sold quickly, and combined with the money I'd recovered from Michael and Jessica, I had enough to buy a beautiful 2-bedroom condo with a view of Tampa Bay and live comfortably for the rest of my life. More importantly, I discovered that I actually liked my own company. For 5 years after Robert died, I'd been so focused on maintaining my connection to Michael's family that I'd never taken the time to figure out who Patricia Williams was when she wasn't being a wife, mother, or grandmother. It turned out she was pretty interesting. The divorce papers arrived in November. Carol brought them to my door with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. Michael had filed for divorce from Jessica, citing irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. According to the papers, which were part of public record, Jessica had been found to have over $100,000 in hidden debt and had been using joint credit cards for personal expenses without Michael's knowledge. "I should probably feel vindicated," I told Carol as we sat on my balcony, watching the sunset over the water. "But mostly, I just feel sad for him." "You warned him," Carol pointed out. "You showed him exactly who she was, and he chose not to believe you. He was in love. People do stupid things when they're in love." "Are you going to contact him? Try to rebuild the relationship?" I considered it. The vindictive part of me wanted to call Michael and point out that everything I'd tried to tell him about Jessica had proven true. The mother part of me wanted to wrap him in my arms and tell him I'd been waiting for him to come home. But the wise part of me, the part that had learned hard lessons about dignity and self-respect, knew better. And if Michael wants a relationship with me, he knows where I am. He has my number. But I'm not going to chase after someone who accused me of being manipulative and controlling for refusing to fund my own abuse. He owes me an apology, and until he's ready to give me one, I'm content with my life exactly as it is. The apology came 3 weeks later. I was in my watercolor class working on a landscape of the bay when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown Ohio number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me step outside and take the call. "Mom?" Michael's voice was small, broken, nothing like the angry man who'd cut me out of his life 6 months earlier. "Hello, Michael." "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You were right about everything. Jessica, God, Mom, the things she did, the lies she told. I should have listened to you. I should have protected you from her instead of helping her hurt you." I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall of the community center, feeling years of hurt and anger and disappointment wash over me. "I know, sweetheart. Can you forgive me? Is there any way to fix this?" "Michael, I forgave you months ago. The question is whether you can forgive yourself and whether you're ready to build an honest relationship based on mutual respect instead of obligation." "I want to try. I want to bring the kids to visit you. They ask about you all the time, and I've been telling them you're traveling, but Emma's smart enough to know something's wrong. I'd love to see them. But Michael, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm not going to go back to being the grandmother who gives everything and expects nothing. I'm not going to fund anyone's life or make myself small to make other people comfortable. If you want me in your life, it's going to be as an equal, not as a bank account or a convenience. I understand, Mom. I respect that. I want that. Then book a flight to Tampa. Bring the kids for a long weekend. Let's see if we can figure out how to be a family again." They came 2 weeks later. Emma had grown 3 inches and lost 2 teeth. Noah had started reading chapter books and could swim without floaties. Michael looked older, thinner, worn down by the collapse of his marriage and the financial chaos Jessica had left behind. But for the first time in years, when my son looked at me, I saw respect instead of obligation. When we talked, he asked my opinion instead of just updating me on decisions he'd already made. When the kids hugged me, it felt natural instead of supervised. We spent 4 days rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty instead of manipulation. Michael told me about the divorce proceedings, about discovering the full extent of Jessica's financial deception, about the counseling he was doing to understand how he'd been manipulated for so long. I told him about my new life in Florida, about the friends I'd made, about the man I was dating who treated me like a treasure instead of a burden. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said on their last night as we sat on my balcony watching Emma and Noah catch fireflies in the courtyard below. "I know that sounds weird given everything that happened, but I'm proud of you for fighting back, for not letting us treat you like garbage just because we were family. I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. It takes courage to admit you were wrong and strength to rebuild your life when everything falls apart. Do you think you'll ever move back to Ohio? The kids would love to have you closer." I smiled, watching my grandchildren run around with the carefree joy that only comes when children feel completely safe and loved. "I don't think so, honey. I've built a good life here. But that doesn't mean we can't build a good relationship across the distance. It just means we'll have to be more intentional about it." And we have been. Michael calls every Sunday morning, just like he used to. But now the conversations are real instead of obligatory. The kids visit twice a year, and I spoil them appropriately instead of excessively. Michael is dating a nice woman named Sarah, who actually seems to like the fact that he has a mother who raised him well. Most importantly, I've learned the difference between unconditional love and unconditional enabling. I will always love my son and grandchildren, but I will never again sacrifice my dignity or security for people who take my love for granted. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them experience the consequences of their choices. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for yourself is to stop accepting unacceptable behavior just because it's coming from family. Jessica was right about one thing. I did use money to get what I wanted. I used my money to buy back my self-respect, my independence, and my peace of mind. It was the best investment I ever made.